Yeah, and welcome back. And uh, Today's program, as our colleague Dr. Patnaik has informed, we are organizing this 3 days program on methods of documentation of biodiversity. And because all of you are science background, biology background students, I hope you are having some information, some knowledge about this biodiversity, and you may be having biology courses in your lower courses as well as your degree course, botany, zoology, and other life sciences courses you may be studying in your college. And this is to orient you to in this direction. In biodiversity conservation is an important aspect, burning aspect in nowadays, because biodiversity is becoming extinct very rapidly, and the many species are becoming extinct day by day. And as you know, India is one of the mega biodiversity regions of the world. India is having only 2% of the land area, but we are supporting 17% of cattle population, 17% of human population over the all over the world. And and it is very important to conserve our biodiversity in spite of very huge population pressure and cattle pressure, and having limited land area. Still we are conserving biodiversity. India is rich in biodiversity, many rich biodiversity areas, many western ghats, Himalayas, Andaman Nicobar Islands, northeastern states, and many of these areas, they are very rich in biodiversity. And we are discovering many new species even now also in Himalayas and western ghats. Many are not yet discovered also, many species. And uh, and keeping this in mind, we our institute, Indian Council of Forest Research, is playing a major role in documenting and conservation aspects we are looking after. And we are uh, since beginning, our council is a recent council, forestry council, but our forestry research institute that was established long back, 100 years before, by Britishers at Dehradun, that is also working on floral biodiversity and faunal biodiversity. And many other organizations like Botanical Survey of India, Zoological Survey of India, they are also discovering many species day by day. And that will not end. No, once if we discover, there are many aspects have to be studied, and their genetic genome mapping has to be done, their conservation aspect has to be looked after, and their mapping has to be done. All these things are looked after by our scientists of our council. And keeping in this view, our biodiversity, our institute is specific for conservation of biodiversity. And we are conducting various programs like this for making aware people about biodiversity conservation. And we have to see some of the international developments also. And as you know, convention on international trade on endangered species, that was uh, organized in that was signed in treaty. That international convention, international agreement treaty was signed in 1973, and it came into force in 1975, keeping the view for conservation of for because the wildlife and many flora and plant and animal species are traded globally, and that is the major reason for extinction of many of the rare, endangered, threatened both plant as well as animal species. Keeping in conservation aspects and to protect these rare, endangered, threatened species and to control their illegal trading, the CITES was uh, came into existence in 1975. CITES headquarters is in Switzerland, Geneva, and they are from, and it is funded by UNEP under United Nations program, United Nations Environment Program. It is funded, and they are also playing important. The CITES, there are three appendixes they are maintaining. They are for appendix one for rare, endangered, threatened species, appendix two some other regulated animals, and CITES three also for controlling the trade of some of the other. These three lists they are maintaining, and there is a clearing house is also established, and for international trade of any wildlife articles or any plant species, it globally traded. That like tiger bones, they China they use it, and elephant tusks they are widely traded, and elephants are killed, and for the sake of this elephant tusks. And many this rare endangered plant species like red sanders also illegally cut and exported to other countries. and we need to conserve these species. Otherwise, within no time they will become extinct. Many other species like also have become extinct, and there is need to conserve it. That is the intention of that international convention of CITES also. And there was one important development took place at the global level. I think you must have heard, in 1992 there was Earth Summit was held in Rio de Janeiro, Brazil. And in that also then was one conference was held, United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change, United Nations Convention on Environment and Development Convention was held. Under these three important treaties were signed for conserving this biodiversity. Convention on Biological Diversity was held, and for controlling pollution, global warming, United UNFCCC was that, United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change. And another third one is for desertification, prevention of desertification, UNCCD was also signed. And now our focus is on this Convention on Biological Diversity. And there were Convention of Biological Diversity, many more than 190 countries they have signed, they are signatory, except USA. All other countries they have signed, and India also is a signatory. And if we sign international signatories, we are obliged to follow the rules of convention. And with that intention only, we are following all the we are this conference of parties they call what, because all are parties only, and nobody is boss. All are equal partners. All are equal parties, and whatever decisions are made in the party conference of parties, and that is binding on all the nations to follow, and this follow-up action has to be taken. And with in continuation of that Convention of Biological Diversity, and there was a need was felt in 2000. There was one another conference of parties was held, Cartagena Protocol they call, Cartagena Protocol on biosafety. And biodiversity, not only that, natural biodiversity, genetically modified organisms also playing an important role. Living modified organisms, like many genetically modified organisms, you may be having by genetic modification. And many plant species are modified and traded. And for that reason, this Cartagena Protocol was also made. And we can't one nation to other nation, we can't take any genetic material without the clearance of this clearing house. And even for import of any import or export of any plant or animal species, that international these obligations have to be followed. Recently, we have introduced cheetah from Africa, and we have taken many permissions for reintroduction. It is not like that simply we can't bring and introduce. There are many permissions we need to obtain, and this Cartagena Protocol also mentions about this many biosafety aspects of this reintroduction or export import aspects. They are apart from that, many genetic resources are used by local people also, and like local hakims, local vaidyas, local naturopathy practitioners. Since time immemorial, they are using these bioresources, biological resources, and their rights have to be protected. Simply conserving is also not the mandate, and these resources have to be used judiciously and conserved. And this CBD main aspect is conservation, sustainable development, and equal, fair, and equitable sharing of benefits arising out of use of these bioresources. These three are the main important aspects of CBD. And conservation one aspect, sustainable development management one aspect. Other aspect is fair and equitable sharing of benefits. Those who are having stakeholders like local healers, local vaidyas, local hakims, they use since Unani, Ayurveda, naturopathy, they are using these traditional medicines, and their rights have to be protected. Indigenous people's rights have to be protected, because this forest we are conserving, but there are many tribals are also integral part of the forest areas, and their rights have to be protected. And simultaneously we have to conserve the biodiversity also. For that reason, and for this especially focusing on benefit sharing issues, one Nagoya Protocol was made in Japan under Conference of Parties 10, and India was also party to it. Under that, there are many guidelines were issued for conservation of biodiversity and sharing of benefits arising out of biological resources. And India is also part. And in Aichi, one place in Japan, there also one targets for conservation and sustainable management of bioresources was also made. And 2011 to 2020 is called this decade of biodiversity. And there were many targets were fixed for many nations. And India also is supposed to fulfill those targets. And subsequent to that, now uh, this again there will be some other conference have to be held because of that COVID it was held. And India, we have to fulfill the targets of IG targets for conservation and sustainable development of bioresources as well as equal and benefit sharing. That these are the international developments basically for conservation of biological diversity. But national level also we are taking up many activities. And as you know, in 2002, we have made Biological Diversity Act. Government of India made Biological Diversity Act. Under that also many restrictions for this conservation of bioresources, plant as well as animal resources was made. And under Biodiversity Act, for there should be some agency. National Biodiversity Authority is also made, established. National Biodiversity Authority is functioning at Chennai. Its headquarters is at Chennai. And whenever any plant material has to be used by any foreign national or any foreign company, the permission of the National Biodiversity Authority is essential in India, Indian framework. We are saying any bioresources. Suppose if any plant material that will be taken by any pharmaceutical company abroad, and they can make a isolate one chemical compound that may be having any medicinal properties, and that company will market it and earn profits, but those benefits will not be shared by local people or Indian government. For that reason, this NBA will give permissions for international use of these bioresources of India. And under the Biodiversity Act also there were many state level biodiversity boards are created. It is the Telangana State Biodiversity Board, like that all states biodiversity boards are functioning. They are looking after this biodiversity aspects, conservation aspects, biodiversity documentation aspects. Their state biodiversity boards are looking after. And this role of NBI is to assist and advise the state biodiversity boards functioning under the state forest departments and state government. But the National Biodiversity Authority is working under the central government. It is the advisory body and funding agency also. Sometimes it will fund many biodiversity conservation aspects. And under the Biological Diversity Act also, in village level also some biodiversity management committees have to be formed. Under village level, biodiversity management committees are being formed in Telangana, Andhra Pradesh. They are forming village biodiversity committees. And what the role of the biodiversity management committee is to maintain people's biodiversity register. They are called PBRs. People's biodiversity registers are maintained. And our institute is also making preparation of assisting the this BMCs in preparation of PBRs, People's Biodiversity Registers. Our scientists and technical staff go to village and they study all flora and fauna. They document all varieties of plants, animals, and they document and make a people biodiversity register for that panchayat, Grama Panchayat, and managed that under the biodiversity management committee. These people's biodiversity registers are maintained. Suppose if any pharmaceutical company, any commercial agency, if they want any bioresources, any plant material or animal source, if they need to take permission from that biodiversity management committee. And if it is that product is commercialized, and that biodiversity management committee, that village biodiversity management committee, village panchayat, will get some benefits, some sharing of revenue after getting commercialization of that product. They may get some benefits to that. This is the concept of the Nagoya Protocol also uh, directs this kind of benefit sharing mechanism. And this is being followed in many parts wherever any such bioresource, biological material is used by any commercial organization. But this is not applicable. This local traditional indigenous people, they can use any medicine, that indigenous knowledge they can use. They will not be charged, they will not be prevented, they will not be obstructed. Local Vaidyas, Hakims, and but commercial, if they use on suppose Patanjali, if they use commercially any plant material, they need to take permission definitely from State Biodiversity Board, because it is within the country. They need to take permission from State Biodiversity Board. But if a foreign company uses, they need to take permission from National Biodiversity Authority. And this is the mechanism of biodiversity conservation and utilization in India under the provisions of Biological Diversity Act 2002. And this state biodiversity boards and National Biodiversity Authority, they are collectively working, and our research organizations like our Institute of Forest Biodiversity, they are also working in the same direction, and we are working together. Apart from that, forest department's role is also essential. Most of the bioresources, forest resources are, and animal and rare plant and animal resources are located inside the forest. As you know, this Wildlife Protection Act is also made in 1972, Wildlife Protection Act. Under that also many um, uh, these national parks are established, so wildlife sanctuaries are established, conservation reserves are established. As you know, national park means nothing can be taken out of national park. National park, everything should be preserved and conserved, unless it is given permitted specifically by some Ministry of Environment and Forest. And inside the sanctuaries also made for protecting specific uh, wildlife or specific important biodiversity aspect. When there is any important biological resource, plant resources or biodiversity rich areas, they are declared as wildlife sanctuaries. In that also, for conserving, especially for rare endangered species like tigers and other species, we are many sanctuaries, more than 600 sanctuaries are there in it. And the sanctuaries are meant for conservation of protection of our rare endangered this animal species or some plant species also, sometimes biorich regions. And national parks, as you know, it is completely preserved, because the evolutionary process has to take in national park, because if human intervention is there, definitely the natural evolution process will not take place. As if it is preserved as it is in a natural condition without any human or cattle disturbance, if it is allowed to evolve, many new species will evolve from the existing plant species or animal species. Like that, we also evolved, no? If evolutionary process is stopped, then there won't be any growth. New species will not come. And this climate change aspect is also important aspect. Climate change is threatening the existence of many species. Many species have become extinct because of this climate change, global warming and climate change and pollution effects. They are threatening wildlife, on land biodiversity, as well as marine biodiversity also being threatened. Many plastics are being dumped, many waste materials are being dumped, radioactive materials are dumped inside in the sea, and these are causing threatening thing, because marine biodiversity is very rich. In land biodiversity, we think we know about land biodiversity, but marine biodiversity nobody has studied, because the benthic flora, fauna, in the sea floor, there is very rich biodiversity is there. Many species are there, but nobody has studied the marine biodiversity at the floor of the sea. Then there is a lot of biodiversity under the sea. But if we keep on dumping waste into the sea, that will threaten the marine biodiversity also. Apart from that, plastic pollution is important. Many major uh, pollutant for the marine animals threatened, because marine animals are threatened because of this plastic waste are being dumped inside the sea, and sewage is released into the water bodies. And I remember that this Ramsar Convention also made in 1975 for protection of these wetland areas, because this, as you know, these animals they don't know boundaries, because we have political boundaries, but we have domestic laws, but international laws also we have to protect. These marine animals, suppose this some of the turtles, they migrate from Australian coast to Indian coast for nesting. They have to be protected under the international laws. Whales and some dolphins, these marine animals, they migrate from one nation to other nation. They don't have boundaries, and they would need to be protected. But laws are not uniform. But international convention and treaties, they make us to responsible for protection. And many migratory birds, Siberian cranes, they migrate to India and for nesting. Like that, protected, these migratory species have to be protected. There are many international treaties and conventions like Ramsar Convention they have made for conservation of wetlands and migratory species. Migratory species have to be protected. Then only we can conserve our biodiversity effectively. It will we have to take local level as well as international level also. uh, the important coordination is important for conservation of any biological plant or animal species or This is the coordinated approach is required, that international laws also and this domestic laws also, there should be uh, some proper coordination and proper implementation should be made. And these are the uh, legal aspects of biodiversity conservation. And apart from that, this methods of documentation is also important. As you are biology students, you are having practicals in botany, zoology, and how you want to go for your conserve your biodiversity. There should be proper survey, monitoring, and preservation techniques. These, our scientists, they are expert in these matters for surveying, documenting, and monitoring, and preserving these aspects. Our scientists are doing this. Apart from that, forest department also doing in conservation of this, and survey and documentation and conservation of um, bioresources, biodiversity resources, especially any animal species, plant, wild animals, wild birds. We are documenting. Like in forest, we use camera traps for monitoring wild animals. Like and we our survey techniques also important too. You have to design survey techniques. Especially biodiversity is conserved at three levels. Three levels of biodiversity need to be conserved. We have to conserve at genetic level. Within this species also many varieties are there, many races are there. Suppose human races, Homo sapiens, there are many races like Negrito race is there, Australoid race is there, Mongoloid race is there. These are the within the species there is a genetic diversity. This constitute the races. We have to in all animal plant species also there are many races are there. We have to conserve at genetic level. This makes the because during the course of evolution, due to mutations, new races, new varieties come. And apart from animals, plants also new varieties are there. Because rice, within the rice there are many varieties are there. Oryza sativa rice, and within that many varieties are there. Because of genetical intervention also, these many varieties of plant species are maintained. Not only that, local species also have to be conserved. Local varieties of, that is the intention of BMCs. If you go to interior place, tribal areas of Chhattisgarh or Orissa, you find many varieties of rice species, black rice, red rice. Now we are not cultivating and not protecting. They are becoming extinct. Such varieties have to be protected for at the genetic level. This diversity has to be protected. Apart from that, species diversity we have to protect, because all the species, the biodiversity means all life forms constitute the biodiversity. At the genetic level, we have to protect. Species level also protect. With in all species have to protected. All whether animal, plant, or microorganisms, all species have to be protected in their natural habitat. If we conserve their natural habitat, we will protect the species. And apart from this species, ecosystem biodiversity is also important, because not only species, when we have diverse ecosystems like forest ecosystem, grassland ecosystem, desert ecosystem, mountain alpine ecosystem, wetland ecosystem, coastal ecosystem, such all these constitute the ecosystem diversity. India is a very diverse region. There are even within the forest also, champion and Seth, as you studied in your forest subject, there are 16 types of forest types they have described in India itself. We have to, all these constitute the ecosystem diversity. We have to conserve all ecological systems, preserve all the ecosystems. Then only we can conserve ecological diversity. For that, this yeah, you can join. Yeah. And yeah, we need to conserve this biosphere reserve concept is also there. We protect our national parks, sanctuaries in protected areas. With notified forest areas only we can declare as a national park or sanctuaries. But outside the national park or sanctuary, how can we protect? There should be some management unit should be there. Because these are the one whole area constitute the biosphere. Suppose whole island may constitute one biosphere. Such as the biosphere, for management point of view, we are making biosphere reserves, and those are the conservation units. Because that area may fall in private land also, that area may fall in revenue land also, that area may constitute forest land also. But whole area having a unique ecosystems, unique biological diversity with contiguity, then that area can be declared as uh, this biosphere reserve. That is not a legal entity, but to management aspect we have for biosphere reserves are also declared. And apart from that, this many uh, sanctuaries, national parks, we declare peripheral areas as this eco-sensitive zones. Under this, some most of the commercial activities are restricted, like These are the some management aspects of conservation. And apart from that, this the documentation aspects, you have to many modern techniques you are using, like remote sensing techniques you are using for mapping of forest types, studying floral biodiversity, even for this animal biodiversity rich areas, you are mapping through remote sensing. These techniques you have to apply, and modern resources, and this radio transmitter techniques. Nowadays, animals are this recently cheetah introduced. They have to put radio collars, radio transmitters. So satellite you can monitor, and these are the things. And for survey is important for all diversity areas have to be surveyed. Even for survey monitoring, if we take into in that aspect, we study biodiversity as three aspects: alpha biodiversity, beta biodiversity, gamma diversity. We call. I think you may be having some inputs on this. Alpha biodiversity means species diversity within a locality. That is. Oh, okay, you have a detailed lecture, no? Oh, okay. If you cover, no problem. These things, now our scientists they will give alpha, beta biodiversity. Uh, our scientists will give detailed inputs to you, and monitoring techniques also important. And as you are a biologist, and survey techniques are important. Survey monitoring is essential for conservation of biodiversity. Without surveying, without monitoring, without mapping, you can't conserve it. Which species is existing where you should know. No? Without that, we can't conserve it. All species have to be documented, and though their localities have to be mapped. And if they are properly mapped, then for their management will be become easier for any forester. If you become a forest officer or forester or any conservationist, naturalist, and all resources have to be properly. There are many different surveying techniques. Our scientists will cover surveying technique. For sampling techniques they will study the different sampling quadrates they make. I think they will show sample plots also, what they are doing, how they are surveying, how they are sampling. Different sampling techniques they will stratified sampling, random sampling. Different techniques are there for knowing the biodiversity of various plant or animal species. Different techniques are followed. Our scientists will cover in detail this sampling techniques, as well as the documentation techniques. They cover how you will document this flora and fauna, especially birds, animals, plants. How you document, how you make plots also. For sampling also you have to design proper plots also. How they make quadrates, square plots, because if you make square plots, that will be easier for comparison. Suppose if you take 1 hectare plot in each representative ecosystem, that then comparison will be easy. One area, if you take a square plot, one area you say take a rectangular plot, you can't compare. No, you have to make a proper plotting also for sampling. You have to make proper design of sample plots also. That is also essential. It should represent the whole ecosystem. If your sample plot represent the whole of the area, then only it will clearly depict the biodiversity. And all these techniques our scientists will teach you in detail, and all monitoring techniques also. Once this sampling is done, how they will document it, how they will map it, mapping how, what kind of the software they are using. All these things they will give you detailed inputs during these 3 days. And after monitoring, what kind of conservation techniques you have to adopt, whether you go for in situ conservation or ex situ conservation, depending on the species and their biodiversity index, and all these things you have to decide. In situ conservation means within the forest you will conserve it. Ex situ conservation means in outside forest you will conserve. All these techniques our scientists will teach in detail during this 3 days course. And this sampling and documentation and mapping and monitoring techniques, all these aspects are very important for conservation of our biodiversity and monitoring, and especially to know which species is becoming extinct, which species population is going in which direction, whether it is increasing or decreasing, declining. All these aspects, so if you properly monitor regularly, then only you can. Many of our foresters they are very good. So suppose Salim Ali, they are the hardcore naturalists. Some of our forest officers also very good naturalists. They document all birds, flora, fauna. Even our entomologists, we have entomology units. Insect biodiversity is the largest biodiversity on earth, and many insect species they are not yet discovered. They collect using nets, they collect and they rear inside the laboratory and they study their life cycle, and such techniques we follow in our institute uh, for knowing about the species diversity and for conserving and for protecting biodiversity. And all these things will be covered during these 3 days course, and it will be very helpful to you, and it will give you a clear picture about our forests, wildlife, biodiversity. And most of you will continue in future, like many of our institutes offering very good excellent courses for you, especially our FRI deemed university. They are offering forestry courses. You can appear for MSc forestry exam, and you can study at FRI Dehradun deemed university MSc forestry course. You can continue that will, and you can uh, uh, continue as your career as a forest officer. You can appear for state forest service exam or IFS Indian forest service exam. You can, and there is one institute, Indian Institute of Forest Management, also there at Bhopal. You can, that is a, they will give postgraduate diploma in forest management, that is equivalent to MBA. That is a very reputed institute, and that degree is also very they are, all those who have passed out, they are placed in better places. They are, you can appear for Indian Institute of Forest Management also. For, and apart from that, we have Wildlife Institute of India at Dehradun. That is a very good institute, and they also offer MSc in wildlife courses. If you want to continue as a wildlifer, if you or that this WII, they are offering good, very good courses. After BSc, you can appear for their entrance exam also. And with this, I will wish you all the best for your successful career. This is the important turning point to choose your career, and I am happy that you are interested in our biodiversity, wildlife, and forest conservation, and all of you become very good conservationists. And with that, I am wishing you and to have a good stay in for these 3 days. And with this, I will conclude. Thank you very much. Thank you for